The principle of caring for creation is rooted into the teachings of the Catholic Church. The Vatican has been preaching for thousands of years on the subject of helping those in need and considers this conclusion essential to Catholicism. Over time, Catholic leaders have begun to apply this narrative to the issue of climate change. Through the words of St. John Paul II, Pope Benedict XVI, and Pope Francis, the Catholic Church has taken a firm stance on why action should be taken against global warming. Specifically through Pope Francis's Laudato Si, the Vatican has developed a platform that brings Catholics together in support of climate change. This narrative, however, is not strictly applicable to members of the Catholic faith. By establishing climate change as a moral issue, Pope Francis gives members of all sects of Christianity a reason to stand up against global warming. Despite this, conservative Christians in the United States oftentimes side with the Republican Party on the issue of climate change and are not advocates for taking action against global warming. In my paper, I point out how the connections made in Pope Francis' Laudato Si between biblical ideals and climate change initiatives should inspire conservative Christian Americans to start supporting politicians that believe in protecting the environment. The words of the leaders of the Catholic Church established the Vatican's point of view on climate change. In St. John Paul II's speech to a crowd on World Peace Day in 1990, he presses the importance of how the human person, endowed with the capability of choosing freely, has a grave responsibility to preserve this environmental order for the well-being of future generations. By establishing this link, St. John Paul acknowledges that global warming requires people from all around the world to partake in climate change prevention groups to make a difference. Additionally, Pope Benedict XVI accepts in his 2010 World Peace Day message that climate change has adapted to be an economic, food-related, environmental, and social crisis, as well as a moral crisis. By relating the acknowledgement of climate change to the concept of other charitable acts considered moral in the Catholic Church, such as helping the poor, Pope Benedict XVI institutes climate change activism as an operation that allows Catholics to see the earth as an entity in need of assistance. The remnants of these ideas are on display throughout Pope Francis's Laudato Si encyclical, his letter sent to all bishops of the Roman Catholic Church. Pope Francis pleads for all to cooperate as instruments of God for the care of creation and reverse the effects of global warming. Also, Pope Francis informs his audience in Laudato Si of their need to realize that a true ecological approach always becomes a social approach, and establishes the idea of helping the environment as a way of helping the less fortunate planet. Research shows that individuals with fundamentalist Christian views have a tendency to side with conservative political views. In this religious group, the direct words of God are seen as the true law in the world, and so the groups try to coincide with the proclamations of Scripture as directly as possible. Members of these religious sects find the ideals of the Republican Party easier to support than those of the Democratic Party due to their disengagement from social, racial, and international issues that the group sees as worldly problems. This support of the conservative political party leads to the degradation of the environment because of Republicans receiving significant financial backing from big oil companies. Giant fossil fuel corporations pay big money to have conservative politicians and scientists denounce the idea of climate change and enact legislation that reduces environmental restrictions. In reality, scientist skeptics no longer deny that global warming is actually happening. Their only question now relates to the causes of global warming and whether or not cutting back on greenhouse gas emissions can solve the problem. What these large oil companies are able to do is give candidates and researchers large sums of money to go in front of the public and highlight the points in their research which suggests that fossil fuels are not the source of global warming. This leads to conservative Christians accepting exaggerated research as truth from Republican lawmakers, influencing them to vote against climate change legislation. By voting to keep Republican politicians in Washington, fundamentalist Christians are furthering a process that allows oil companies to take advantage of the American people at the expense of the planet. In the past, conservative Christians have not been able to connect to the issue of climate change to religion because the Scripture does not make a statement on the topic. It is well known, however, that religious attitudes, spiritual practices, and common ethical attitudes can serve to broaden and reinforce environmental perspectives. In order for a message to reach conservative Christians, a creative approach to retrieving and reclaiming texts is necessary to make Christian scripture apply to climate change issues. This is where Pope Francis becomes a key component in connecting the present-day ecological issues to fundamental Christian beliefs displayed in the Bible. Instead of listening to the beliefs of the Republican Party, conservative Christians should be looking at Laudato Si in order to understand how the scripture lends itself to viewing climate change as a moral issue. In his encyclical, Pope Francis urges readers to view climate change as a matter of intergenerational solidarity and instructs Christians to remember that the planet is a gift from God that its inhabitants are responsible for taking care of. Fundamentalist Christians must understand that God created this earth, and it is their moral responsibility to look after the planet during its time of need. In fact, conservative Christians need to understand that moral and spiritual values are crucial for promoting transformation amid the environmental crisis the planet is experiencing. Understanding the relationship between morality in the Bible and climate change can inspire Earth stewardship and ease fundamentalist Christians toward supporting leaders and legislation that believe in protecting the environment.